Hey everyone, it's Karnak, Star Wars Armada Explained. It's your buddy, it's your pal. We're going to be looking at an officer that came in one of the new expansions, the Starhawk. We're going to be looking at the Wedge Antilles officer for the Rebel Alliance. So let's get right in here. So Wedge Antilles, we did have him as a squadron you could take. Now he has an officer form. So remember when characters, there's multiple characters that can fill different roles. You see that little dot or bullet point in front of their name for Wedge Antilles signifies they are unique. You can only ever have one Wedge Antilles in your fleet. So if you bring the officer, can't bring the fighter. If you bring the fighter, can't bring the officer. How do you know this Wedge Antilles equips the officer slot? You look at the bottom left-hand corner of the card. Again, opposite of that, you'll see he's faction-specific for the Rebel Alliance, and he only costs 4 points. What's his ability? And his ability is pretty straightforward. And I think for 4 points, he's going to be a really awesome staple card, especially for Rebel Squadron players. So it reads, before the end of the Squadron phase, you may spend 1 Squadron token to choose up to 3 friendly, non-unique squadrons without strategic at distance 1 to 5. Those squadrons gain cloak until the end of the round. So for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much, hey, you spend a squadron token, you can choose 3 squadrons that aren't unique and not strategic, and they get cloak. Essentially gives them a bonus distance 1 movement, kind of similar to like fighter coordination teams in a way. So with this kind of a card setup, it's definitely something you kind of need to have a little bit of playing for, but otherwise, like, I really like this card because it makes the rebels even more flexible with like their squadron movements and things that need to happen. So let's dive right in. How does this card work in a nutshell? So the first thing we need to get down is the timing of this card. And some people, myself initially, was kind of confused about the timing because I just thought, oh, before the end of the squadron phase. So just at any point, in the squadron phase, but before the end of it, I just spend a squadron token and I can choose 3 squadrons at some point and take that care of that. Well, I mean, sure, you probably could do it that way if you really wanted to, but to be technical and to make sure I'm explaining things as well as I should, the timing for when you resolve this card is right as the last squadron, regardless of whatever last squadron is for either player, is the last squadron in the squadron phase is done activating. Because, again, this is before the end of the squadron phase, which is after all squadrons are done activating. And then if there's any cloak, which is at the end of the squadron phase, you have a small window where you can say, hey, I'm going to spend the squadron token and choose 3 squadrons to give cloak to. So that is the technical timing window, is as soon as the last squadron's done activating and before the actual timing of when cloak takes place. So again, very small window, technically, where you can spend that squadron token. The reason why I'm saying that is because I'm sure some people say, oh yeah, I spend the squadron token and then I choose these 3 squads. And if you're doing that in the middle of squadrons being moved around and activating, well, you're giving away free information to your opponent that he could now be like, oh, he chose those 3 squads, so I better not make some of these movements or other things I was planning to do because now there's no point, or maybe there is a point to it. So again, just being specific so that you understand and know what's going on. So okay, before the end of the squadron phase, spend that squadron token. All right, we're going to go ahead and use some of the squadrons here for this example. Whoop. Just throw these guys out here. Perfect. All right, so I spent the squadron token. All right, I can choose 3 friendly non-unique squadrons, which means none of the named squadrons like Lando or Tien Nub or even the unique generics, like Gold Squadron or Rogue Squadron, nothing that is a unique name you can choose. But you can choose any of the generic like B-Wings, A-Wings, generic X-Wings, generic YT-1300s. But the only thing you can't choose is VCXs, because they have strategic. And I know why they did this is because, Rebels already have kind of a bit more access to being able to kind of shuttle these VCXs around and they didn't want, I guess, that mechanic to potentially be abused. So that's why they put that limitation on there. So in this situation, you need to check, okay, what 3 squadrons are at distance 1 to 5 of the ship he is equipped to. So you bring up the range band, maybe bring up the right one. There we go. So black circle's distance 1, red is 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys get the idea. So essentially, any squadron at distance 1 to 5 of the transport or ship he's equipped to, you can select. So for example, even though this B-Wing is just barely touching on that yellow there, he is considered at distance 1 to 5. So you would be able to choose that squadron, or even, again, if the squadrons are right next to the transport. And when you're making that measurement to see what's in range, you're measuring from the physical plastic base of the ship to the closest point of the squadron. You do not measure from the shield dials or the shield frames. Those don't count for measuring. It's only the physical plastic base. And again, you're not making an attack, so you don't range from the cardboard. I'm being specific about that because some people don't quite understand if there's a difference, and there is. It's a minor one. But again, you range from the physical plastic base of the ship to the closest point of the squadron that you would like to try to activate. So in this situation, we'll say we've got some B-Wings here and some YTs here. Everybody's all activated. But maybe these TIE fighters had put themselves just out of range. We're like, you know what? I need to tie those TIE fighters up so they're not stopping my B-Wings. I'm going to choose 2 of these YT 1300s. So you choose them, and you say, okay, I'm going to choose these 2 YT 1300s. I'm going to choose that B-Wing, and they gain cloak. And then now you proceed to end of round when cloak takes place. And in terms of whom does cloak first compared to other characters, remember the first player, if he's got cloak for any of his squadrons, in that timing window, all of his squadrons would need to resolve cloak first before the second player resolves cloak, depending on whom has cloak or not, which there's not very many units that have cloak, but again, I'm making sure I'm being specific. So, alright, so we're going to say these 2 YT 1300s are going to just move within distance 1. They're going to saddle right up next to these TIE fighters. They're going to lock them all down. Maybe this B-Wing wants to reposition over here, and there you go. So that is how Wedge Antilles works as the officer card. And I just think he's just for 4 points. Yeah, you kind of have to feed the token mechanic of the Squadron token. That's something you definitely have to take into account and consider. But if you can somehow keep that Squadron token fed, I mean, just kind of pushing along B-Wings or YT 1300s, especially, having the cloak keyword, where even if they're engaged, if you need to reposition them, or do something else with them, it's just so beneficial. It gives Rebels more flexibility, which is what Rebels are all about, is flexibility and not being tied down to one place. But that's Wedge Antilles. I don't think I missed anything about it. Nope, no unique squadrons, no strategic squadrons, and again, made sure I went over the specific timing window of the card, which I did. But of course, if you feel like I missed anything or if I got something wrong, please be sure to point it out. Let me know. Or if you have any questions or maybe some situations where you've already found some use for this card. You guys are fantastic, and I'll catch you all next time.